I'm going to show you guys how to adjust the valves. I don't know if I've ever even shown this video. My buses all have chromoly push rods now, so I'm not adjusting valves, not doing much adjustment to them anyway. So, and I check them all the time. I always take the valve cover off and check them, and I might have to do a little bit of adjustment, but it's done a little bit different. I'll explain that in this video as well. So the first thing I do is I pull my distributor cap off, which you should be really good at doing that, and I mark top dead center on my pulley. And it looks like my camera's lens is over to the side, so I'm actually straight on. And then if you look down, I mark exactly 180 degrees the other side of the pulley with a paint marker. So if you don't have a paint marker, you might want to grab one off Amazon. Maybe I'll put a link in the description. Sharpie paint marker. Mark it up first. So I always do that first and have it marked. Usually the second, third time, I'll have it already marked. So after that, it's fine. So what I'll do is I'll take it to top dead center of number 1, which should be in this position. And it will point at your number 1 spark plug wire, which is right here. If you put the cap on, that's number 1. If your distributor is dropped wrong, you might be pointing towards a different plug, and it shouldn't be dropped the wrong way. There's a reason that they're dropped the way they are. If you have an electronic ignition, it doesn't matter. It can be dropped any direction, it doesn't matter. The reason that they have them dropped a certain way is because on a factory engine with points, number 3 cylinder is retarded. So if it's dropped the wrong way, your cap's like this, and that's number 1 or something like that, or number 1's way over here, and you have a stock distributor, you're retarding a different cylinder than what the factory recommended retarding, which was to make your other cylinders work harder and that cylinder not to work quite as hard. Anyway, that's why they retarded number 3, to make it run cooler on that cylinder. So anyway, that's why they have that. But anyway, let's go into the adjustment. So we make sure it's pointed at number 1, that we know it's at number 1 top dead center. You pull off your rockers, and you're going, what? Why do you pull your rockers off? Because this right here is a torque wrench, and you should do this at least every other time you adjust your valves. And what you want to do is you want to torque the inner 2 and then the outer 2 of every cylinder. So we torque this one. This one was loose. See, that's why you do it. And this one, check it. That one was tight. And I do it to 24 foot-pounds like you normally do. So all 4 cylinder head bolts are tight on the bottom. If you do this every other time you adjust your valves, you're going to have less issues with your heads coming loose. You don't want your heads to come loose, then it hammers up your case savers, or if you didn't have case savers, that might end up pulling the studs. So you retorque them at least every other time. Now on my aluminum case engine, I've never had to, the torque specs don't move at all because the engine does not move as much. So people go, oh, well, aluminum's not as good as magnesium, whatever. It doesn't move as much. So I have less issues with the aluminum case. Yes, they're more expensive than mag case. So anyway, normally this is how it's done. I do that first. Now I'm going to put these back on, and I'm going to torque this back down to, I think it's 18. You may not, if you just know how to tighten it to that, you can do that without using the torque wrench. But I'll put these back on, and then I'll adjust the valves. Now so I'll start with number 1, because it's at top dead center of number 1 right now. I'll rotate the crankshaft. If you notice, number 2's right here, number 3's right here, number 4's right here. So I will rotate the engine backwards, because the actual the way it rotates is 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2. Okay, So we're going to rotate it backwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, because then it's easier, right? You 1, 2, 3, 4. You can remember real easily. So once I get this one done adjusted, I'm going to take my factory wrench. I'm going to rotate it counterclockwise. 180 degrees. I'm just going to show you right now. It's a little hard to do because I got the rocker shafts off. All right. So that's 180 degrees. The next one now. So now it's pointed at number 2. So you know which one you're at. Number 2. And you go backwards another 180 degrees. Blah, 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 blah. 3 and 4. It's all done the same. And how you know which cylinder you're at is by which direction the rotor is pointed towards. If you forget, you can always put your distributor cap back on, lock it into place like that, so where it's locked in, where the clips go on. And if it's pointing at that plug wire, you know that it's number 1. So the specs are, most of the Volkswagens are 6,000s. You'll see specs all over the place. You know, I've seen 40 horse, 6 and 8, or whatever, but I adjust them all to 6,000s. If you want to hear noise, then you can do that. I adjust them all except for Chromoly pushrod engines. If you adjust a Chromoly pushrod engine at 6,000s, it is going to be super noisy. Clackety, 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 clack. If you don't want to listen to clacking, I'll tell you what to do next. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and put these back on. Since I've adjusted since I've went ahead and retorqued the heads, and we did find one loose bolt, which is normal. That's okay. If one's loose, don't panic. Just retorque it, move on. That's normal. So now when you put the feeler gauge in after I retorque the heads, usually it kind of brings everything back. It's nice and normal. So this one here is nice. A tight 6 is what you want. This one's just a hair looser, but we're good. Still nice and tight when it goes in. You can feel both rubbing surfaces, and we're adjusted correctly. So now we're going to move it to the next one. All right, so now we're facing number 2. Turn it counterclockwise to where that's at top dead center. All right, now we're going to check these ones. That's a little bit too tight. This one is too. So we're going to loosen up the nut here, back it out a little bit. It's just a little bit tight. We'll adjust them out, so we'll loosen up this. There's actually a tool you can have that has a wrench that slides over a screwdriver. I don't know if I could put a link and made the description for it. I don't have one, but they're kind of handy. I'll go ahead and adjust that up, and we'll take a look. All right, so now we're at a nice tight 6. You bring it in. You can feel it nice and tightly go, but you don't have to shove it in. Same thing here, nice and tight. Make sure you notice this feeler gauge is all pretty worn because it's been done a few times. So I'm gonna put a new gasket on there. All right, so you don't need to change the gasket like every time, but this one's been a little while since, I mean, years, really, not that many miles, but since it has been a few years. Why is that not coming out? I use the weather strip adhesive to hold the gasket. You might say to yourself, you know, you don't need gasket sealer. Well, what happens sometimes on these old Volkswagens is the gasket will be in there like this, and it'll go like that, and it will literally pour oil out. So yes, you should use some sort of gasket sealer. You can use this. You can also use silicone, but you got to let it dry really good, you know, before you drive it. So make sure that, you know, because the problem with silicone is it's slippery sometimes. So it depends on which one you use. If you use the Mega Black, that's usually pretty good. But I like to use this stuff right here. They have the yellow. This is more common. This is the black one, but it doesn't really matter. Note, before I put it on here, it was clean and dry, the gasket area. Clean and dry. means no leaks. If you got oil still on that surface, you're probably going to leak. So, if you are going to forgo replacing the gasket, make sure use some brake cleaner and clean the surface of here and clean the surface of where it goes. So all the way around here, make sure there's no oil coming down while you're, because sometimes it coagulates up in here and wants to come down. So you just got to take your time and make sure that there is no oil on this. In fact, I'll take brake cleaner on this rag and I'll clean all this really clean, and I'll put that gasket on there, put that valve cover on there real quick while it's not, when there's no oil on that surface. And even if it's a reused gasket, 99% of the time it's not going to leak if you have it clean and dry. The other reason you might want to replace the gasket is if you didn't do it last time yourself. There might not have been gasket sealer on here, and if there's not a gasket sealer between here and the valve cover, there'll be oil on that side of it. But if they glued it on the way that I do, then you can reuse them at least once. Usually almost every other valve change, adjustment, I'll replace the gaskets and they won't leak. So hey, that's how you do it. All right, so this side's done. The same thing we're going to do over on the other side, just basically the same process. It's a German chiller. You guys think it's real Volkswagen? I don't know. I think it was like from a shop. That's what this end is for right here. That's why it's like that. All right, so we've gone counterclockwise another half turn. We did that off camera. Now we're pointing at number 3, and that's, if you go to the number 3 spark plug, it goes to that one right in the back corner. You know that. I think we all know that, but we'll kind of simplify it a little bit. Of course, I've got my valve cover off. I use this end of the wrench, pop it off. That's what that's for. So the bail's off. We'll pull this feller off. Get it over here to replace the gasket. So again, if you're going to reuse the gasket, make sure you put it on there and wiggle it all around to make sure it's in the proper exact same area. I just put it on there and start wiggling it around a little bit, and it's clean and dry. Either way, if you put new ones on or old, that oil that's on there, a little bit of oil film, if you put this back on there with that oil film, it'll leak for sure. So we pulled off the valve train and retorqued all 4 head bolts. We're not going to do the top ones, just the bottom. That's what we do, and done it this way for years. That's a retorque. Now we'll put the valve train back on. All right, I got these down to a nice tight 6, so you can get the feeler in there, but it's tight when it's in there. That's what a tight 6 is. It's tight, but it fits in there. You can feel some resistance, but not really hard to put in. All right, so let's go backwards one more time. Half a turn. Till our other marks on top. Rotor's pointing at number 4. If you want to double check it. Number 4 right here. All right, always leave the distributor cap off when you're doing a valve adjust. So one thing I'll do is I'll take them like that. I can tell they're just a hair tight by just feeling it. If I can get it in there. I know I got it in there once with 2 hands. So yeah, I already know they're just a little bit tight, so I'll loosen those up and readjust them to where they're just a tight 6, which is, again, there's resistance, but it's not super hard to put it in there. All right, so we're looking good on the last one. You just put them in. It's really hard for me to do with this one for some reason. It's nice and tight. You can see it just kind of has resistance, but not super hard to put in, so you're not using the spring, pushing the valve spring in. So anyway, clean and dry, gasket on, and we're done. To make sure you got all this off here, I use a drill with a little wire brush and make sure all the old gaskets off. That's another cause for leaks. Put some stuff on here and we're done. All right, last thing, don't forget your distributor cap. All right, I'm gonna get my hands clean and do a little more cleanup here and call this one good. Then we're gonna do a couple more things with this thing. So one more thing I forgot to mention, if you have chromoly push rods, a lot of guys are going to wonder, how do you adjust at 0? Basically what you do is you reach up in there, you grab your push rod, okay, and it should spin freely. So you want to be able to grab the push rod, wiggle it, and see if there's any play. If you can't really feel any play and the push rod spins completely freely, that's 0. So that's about where I set them on the other buses that have chromoly push rods. And on the one with aluminum case and chromoly push rods, I rarely ever have to even adjust them. They just stay in place because aluminum is a much more stable material than magnesium, and that case is constantly expanding and contracting, and it expands and contracts at a different rate than the other metals. And the aluminum is more consistent. It stays, it doesn't move as much. So it doesn't, the aluminum seems to keep its adjustment really good. I mean, if I can't spin it, if I get in there and I have it at TDC, top dead center, and I can't spin the push rod, that's a tight one. You better make sure you loosen that one up. If it's got a little bit of play in it, then I'll tighten it up to where it spins, perfectly spins real easily, but it doesn't feel any play. So that's how you do the 0. Again, if you want to do that, do it at your own risk. Some guys will say put a smaller tolerance on it, but I go 0 because it's too noisy. It's really, really noisy. If even at 3000s or something like that, it's really noisy. So anyway, it's up to you on that. That's the way a lot of the guys do it. So anyway, I'll talk to you in the next one. Please like, share, and subscribe.